Twitch. Hi, Mystery. Oh, I'm not even on my actual stream. There we go. I'm watching an ad, which is new for me. Usually my ad block takes care of that. I don't know what I want to draw for a preview or a stream notice. I guess it can be whatever the fuck, huh? I might draw a dead name then. Haven't drawn them in a hot minute. Eye socket holes are always sort of round, so today is going to be just coloring. Unfortunately, it's going to be limited palette coloring, so it's not going to be super interesting. I'm having an off day because I woke up at fucking 6 p.m. So we'll see how into it I am by the end of coloring this page, and I might color something else. Unfortunately, I already colored that other commission I was working on off stream. So I can't do that. I do gotta practice with Dead Name and their expressions. They're supposed to be a pretty flat character in general, but even for flat characters, they need to be readable for the audience most of the time, unless they're specifically supposed to be unreadable. So even for Dead Name, I usually do mitten hands first. Let's try that again. My dog is in here snoring. She was right next to my head yesterday snoring. That's just how she is. I took her to the vet when she was a baby because I was worried that the snoring was a health problem, and the vet told me that she just has kind of a weird elongated palate and it's nothing to actually worry about. Still worry sometimes, but I know I would get told the same thing if I brought her to a vet again. Trying to give them more of a hunch here to make the pose a little more dynamic. I'm also in my workroom today because my laptop screen has kind of been getting worse. I wiggled a little bit, I think, last night, and the screen shut off completely until I did some very unnecessary and complex jiggling with the hinges so that it turned back on. So now I have it on a stationary platform so that it doesn't get moved around like that. I'm comfier. I usually work on the couch in the living room because that's where I'm comfier, and the long periods of sitting are less hard on my back on like a couch than a chair. But I would rather not have my laptop die on me, so that's what we're doing. Good tip: lean back in your chair if you're gonna be there for a while. Try not to lean forward. That's usually what I do. It's kind of, if it's the wrong kind of leaning back, then it can get hard on your tailbone. Still better than your entire upper back hurting, in my opinion. Okay, I'm gonna put this on Patreon and then open up what I gotta do. Oh, I hope I'm pronouncing this right. Sotomotor. Honestly, that's impressive because bones are pretty difficult to draw. They're like very specific. They're organic, but they have the nature of inorganic things like buildings and cups because they're so stiff. Almost mechanical. I really do like Dead Name though. I'm kind of averse to drawing them still because of that one critique I got on their design, but I know I gotta get over it. Save this. And open up the file that I need to. So it's already lined and everything. I've got the base down. And I guess I'll start from the top. because both of them have dark surroundings for their mouth, it's kind of difficult to figure out what to do so that the colors don't blend. Usually I'll add a little bit of the outer edges, like the line color or the darkest color, and then a little shadow on the tongue. That's my method right now. My method is panicking and crying as I add more shading. Got some leaky lines here. I think most of these panels were clean enough that all I had to do was sort of smooth out the lines. The last two panels I ended up redrawing when I was lining because Bailey's head was really wonky. So right now I'm just putting down the most basic colors for everything. I'm kind of filling in the background here because I feel like it gives a little more contrast. Even though sometimes I will leave the background all one color. I know that her hair is protecting her from like the outer part of the background, so there's separation from her face and the rest of that, so I don't have to worry that the colors are gonna get blurry. In these particular panels. I also edited some of the dialogue just a little bit. Just a tiny little bit. That's usually also something I do during the lining phase, and also a reason that I don't particularly like streaming when I'm lining. I know as someone who is interested in comics that it's very cool to see the process of like first draft to final draft, but I feel like most writers are very self-conscious about showing the beginning of their work as opposed to just the final product. And I am one of them. Mainly the big reason that I do kind of base colors first and not fully rendering each panel on its own is because it makes coloring faster overall, because I have more of the colors right there in big blocks that I can just eye drop for the next one, and I don't have to scroll all the way up for the palette. No, I'm not enjoying that. A little bit of shading to Bailey's shirt right here so that it doesn't really fight with the colors of Mom's shirt. Oh, please. I'm trying. Nope, that's not happening. It's still not. There we go. In general, for sequential panels, I try to keep the shines going in the same direction, but for some panels, I will change which way the shines go, like it could be going this way diagonally. But for this one, I feel like it carries the motion to be going to the left. Fill in those little stray pixels. I can't really complain about them because overall doing it in a binary pixel style makes it faster. I would undoubtedly spend more time coloring if I just use the pen tool, but still annoying. Also, that's impressive, being able to make bones look expressive. I'm still practicing myself. And even then, I had to take a lot of stylistic liberties. I should at some point draw a more accurate cat skull and then Dead Names design next to it to make it obvious what everything is. I'm thinking of playing around with the line colors a little more, maybe in the next one. For this one, I feel like I'm already locked into a style. For example, lines here, because they're all surrounded by a light color, I could make lighter, etc. Did not realize I accidentally filled in that window, and I didn't want to do that. I would recommend, I feel like so far my experience with using limited palettes has taught me less about color and more about strengthening the composition of my pieces. So if you feel like the composition of your art isn't very strong, I would recommend this, but not limiting your palette if you're trying to learn about color or how to color things. I limited my palette for a long time because that's common art advice. And I feel like it just made my pieces very flat and monochromatic because I would go, okay, my palette is blue this time and I'm going to use only blues, and doesn't you might as well be painting in gray then because it's all the same color. I think limited palettes can work very well if you know what you're doing. Even then, a little variation between your main color and other parts. Like, say you've got a yellow painting, it might be good to use red for shading or the darker parts as opposed to just a darker yellow. You get what I'm saying? But if you're just learning based on don't use that many colors, you'll probably stick to yellow. One of the original lines that I was going to include in this panel, or this one, with Mom talking here, was save it for your therapist, and I decided not to. One, for the sake of not crowding the action happening. Also because I don't want to lock myself into saying Bailey is already seeing a therapist at 16 before referencing my timeline. When you write like 16, 19, 30 years of backstory for a character, it's easy to get things a little mixed up. I'm thinking of starting a document where I just list a character and then major events and ages so that I have a simple way to access them without having to look through like lore stream files and such. Overall, I just say if it wasn't in a colored comic, then it isn't canon. It might have gotten changed at some point. Because there is, when you're developing a character, there is a lot of changing details and things like that. Here I'm kind of using the outline of the door handle, the silhouette as a guideline to make the background a little less fussy. one of the differences between Bailey's design and their mom's right here is you can see their mom's arms are darker and their arms are the same as their base color, which kind of alludes to the fact that their coloration could very possibly be that they just aren't done with puberty yet. Like they're still developing. Last panel to color, then I can go back and start doing the details, quote unquote. The shines on Bailey's hair will kind of separate the darker colors from each other, which I already know, and on their beak too. I headcanon personally, the reason that their beak is shiny and their mother's isn't is because they probably use beak shiner. Beak polish. Not the same as nail polish. Let's try the line color for this one. There's a window here which is going to break up the color of the background and the headrest. Okay. Like Bailey, the rule for Mom's face is, I don't think I even have a name for her yet. I might have it tucked away somewhere. The rule for Mom's face marking is doesn't go above the eyebrows. Hers extends all the way to her neck. Not good enough. I have to go back real quick and look at the previous pages for reference. Okay, their eyes are both the same color as their base markings. Add a little bit of shine to the eyes so they don't look completely lifeless. What I've noticed is whatever side of the eye you put the shine on, your little dot of eye white should go on the opposite side. It gets really muddled if you put them right next to each other. She's also got some markings on her neck. And I give her a duller hair shine than Bailey. Need a seatbelt here because it kind of disappears under the speech bubble. Because she's older. And I think Bailey probably uses hair gel. They also just had their hair done, so it's obviously got styling products in it right now. I add the shine to the hair regardless because it helps break it up, make it its own form. I saw this post on Twitter that was like, I'm an artist, so I can draw a bunch of cool shit, and I still struggle to draw basic shapes like a heart and a star. And that is absolutely true. The hearts get me. What I don't like about dark under eye markings, even though I give a lot of my characters that, is it makes the details of the expressions that I put around the eyes much harder to see. Which I suppose might be desirable for someone like Bailey's mom, where it makes her look younger. What I try to do to compensate is not leave the markings on the edge of the line detail so that it doesn't blend in even more. That's just damage control though. Then color in our pupils. Add a little bit of detail and life to them. If your eyes look a little bit off center, you can also use the eye shines to your advantage here to make them look more focused by calculated placement. I'm kind of putting some shine on her hair right around where the eye marking is so that breaks it up a little bit. Everything you kind of want to be, you want the colors in nice, thick shapes. should consider colors that are like just a little splash tangents, I think, and try to fix them. I'm also going to add some shine to seat belts. To define them. The texture of seatbelts has always fascinated me. I don't think I've got it down, but it's kind of grainy and fibrous. Give the heart a little more shape here. Because my laptop is always at the same angle now, I'm not sure if I'm viewing it from the right angle to see how the contrast actually looks, but I gotta just trust that I am. And also, need an iris here. Making the hair texture too thin or long tends to make hair look very, how do I put it, stringy? Not in a good way. So generally I try to be not too careless with texturing hair. Don't want to waste my own time. working on Bailey first because it's more refreshing than working on Bailey's mom after 3 panels of her. Trying to mix the highlight colors for Bailey's hair a little bit. Don't want to push it too much or it's just going to get muddy. Put some hair shines right here to break it up. And then some down here to lead the eye. Maybe a little shading on this arm, on the sleeve. When I'm working at this desk, because my tablet is very old, the rubber parts that usually create friction on the bottom so that it doesn't slide around as you're drawing are completely gone. So I have to draw with a rag placed underneath it so that it slides a little less, because the desk itself is very smooth and slippery. And Bailey's hair needs some highlights. Trying to avoid the highlights contacting those texture lines for the feathers. It's just bad news. No, we're not going to do the shading, but I might throw some on the shirt since it's in the last panel too. Yeah. I'm sure I could buy a new one, but I'm not going to. Gotta wait until it's an emergency. You need a new one much more than I do. In a week, I'll see if I can get you like a new one since that whole process is happening right now. And it's Hanukkah, so. It's supposed to be giving to people. window needs a little shine in this one. Don't want it to intersect with the speech bubbles. Maybe in another 3 years I'll finally render the backgrounds on the outside of the windows. Habitually. My highlighting game used to be pretty fucking terrible, but I'm not sure whether I would say it's better to have too many highlights or not enough. I know in general, people prefer the look of too many highlights, like it's an ooh, shiny kind of thing. It can kind of hurt the eyes of people who don't like that style, though, so it's a double-edged sword. These highlights aren't very good. I'm gonna try to redo them. It's very windy today. I turned the heat on as soon as I got up, so I'm not noticing it temperature-wise, but really going at the window right next to me. Alright, last two panels. Will be interesting to see how the next page plays out because it'll either be the last page or second to last. There might be a palette change. The ending is kind of similar to Over Before You Know It, as in there's a time jump to a related scene. There was also a mom yelling in Over Before You Know It, so I guess they're very similar. Glassy crying eyes. Don't want the highlights to be too strong on the seatbelt because everything's supposed to be kind of faded out. Except for Bailey. Wrong layer. Thank you, Tara. I don't like how similar the ending's going to be to Over Before You Know It, but I felt like the critique or pointing out that there are a lot of coming out and gender realization stories already was a very, not to say valid, but it was a valid critique. So I wanted to add a little something to the ending that was more than that. Tears are hard to do with a limited palette. My life is a recurring motif. You're right, though. These are similar topics because it's about the same thing, essentially. Bailey just gets it developed a little more straightforwardly because their story is all about gender. The reactions, the mom's reactions, are also a little different. Like, next page, mom's gonna say some stuff about Bailey crying instead of feeling guilty about it. So, there is that. In general, like, I think the main reason I agree, besides that, yeah, there are a lot of stories about coming out already, is that I prefer to focus on characters who aren't in an uncomfortable situation gender wise. So they already have stuff at least a little figured out. It's uncomfortable for me to portray like trans characters being uncomfortable. Add some shading there. Maybe here, so that Bailey doesn't look too blank in comparison. And mom's hair needs some highlights. I think that's about it. I want to do more, but I got an ask about Nofna and I want to answer it and be able to fuck around. So I think I'm going to end the stream here. So thank you everybody who showed up. I will be doing another one soonish. If nothing else, on Thursday or Friday for the sketch comic.